Now, once upon a time, there was a man, and his name was Zaccheus. He had a house, he had a job, and he was rich. He would have fitted in quite nicely in the Chagrin Valley and at a service such as this. But clearly neither his money, nor his home, nor his job gave him enough to satisfy his yearnings. And Luke, the gospel writer, tells us that he wanted to see who Jesus was. It doesn't simply say that he wanted to see Jesus, but he wanted to see who Jesus was. Were the things that had been said about this Galilean carpenter true? And that actually puts him in the company of many, and some who are perhaps here this evening. And that is actually your question too. Is there any validity to the things that have been read, to the songs that have been sung? The gospel writer doesn't give us any background on this at all. He doesn't tell us just why it was that Zaccheus felt this way. It could have been simply curiosity. After all, the news of Jesus had been spreading, not least amongst the community represented by Zaccheus himself. He'd become known as somebody who gave very, very good talks. He spoke as with authority and not like the scribes and the Pharisees. That's what people said. They also said that he had become a friend of tax collectors and sinners. This had annoyed the religious authorities dreadfully, but still he kept it up. And indeed, when he spoke, the folks who were least likely to listen to him flocked to him, and the religious folks who might have anticipated listening to such a teacher, they just muttered in disgrace. So it may be simply curiosity. It may also have been that he longed for companionship. He was a tax collector himself. Tax collectors were not popular. I'm not sure they're very popular today either, but that's a different matter altogether. I've never met a tax collector, so I wouldn't know. But the tax collectors at the time of Zaccheus were on the level, really, of Nazi sympathizers in Second World War France. They would not be welcome to your home for dinner. They would not be the companions that you would choose. And consequently, although many of them had done very, very well financially, they were bereft when it came to the issues of friendship. And it may simply have been along those lines, the longing for a friend, especially if this man is a friend of sinners. And it could have been that sin thing, of course, that got him. Not his curiosity or a longing for a companion, but his conscience. What the North American Indians describe as a triangle in the very core of a man or a woman's being. That when we do something wrong, when we think something wrong, when we fail to do what we ought to do, it spins around inside of us and it jags us. It's just a picture. And the more we do wrong things, the more we think wrong things, the more we ignore the promptings of our conscience, eventually the corners of the triangle are worn away, and it is able to spin quite happily without any concern on our part at all. But maybe Zaccheus had decided when he went to bed at night, I can't go on like this. I don't want to be known as an embezzler. I don't want to be known as corrupt. I don't want to be known as somebody who is taking it from my own people and lining my own nest. I don't know. We're not told. All we're told is that he wanted to see who Jesus was. But he had a problem. His desire, his design was jeopardized by his size. He was a small man. Luke says that he was small of stature. He was, in politically correct terms, vertically challenged. You're not allowed to say someone is small, they're just vertically challenged. In Scotland we have a word for it, and that is wee. He was a wee man. And everybody knew that he was a wee man. And indeed every child that's ever been in a Sunday school knows about Zaccheus, who was a wee little man. Why you have to have wee and little together is just because you don't understand what wee means. We'd be saying like he is a little man. You don't have to say it twice. We got it the first time. He is a wee man. Well, let me pause and just acknowledge what some of you are thinking. Now you've reached this point and you said to yourself, I think Alistair has stayed up too long today and he doesn't realize this is Christmas Eve. After all, what's the story of Zaccheus got to do with Christmas? Well, it's got absolutely everything to do with Christmas. Because the story of Zaccheus is a wonderful example, a wonderful illustration of the reason why Jesus actually came. In the words that have been read and in the songs that have been sung, we've been made aware of the fact that before the birth, an angel had announced to Joseph that the name to be given to the child would be Jesus. And the explanation was straightforward. Jesus, Greek for Joshua, simply means God saves, or God is the salvation one. You will give him the name Jesus, said the angel, for he shall save his people from their sins. So he comes for those who are prepared to admit that they're messed up. He comes for those who are prepared to admit that they've broken God's law. He comes for those who are prepared to acknowledge that they have transgressed, that they've parked on God's yellow lines, that they have overstepped his boundaries. And of course, I wonder if anybody here would be prepared to stand up on a night like this and say, well, I don't know who that is, but it certainly can't be me, because I've never done any of that. Well, let me ask you, have you loved God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? That's the first and the greatest commandment, said Jesus, and if you haven't done that, then you've broken the law, and you're a lawbreaker, and you can't fix it, and somebody's going to have to do something for you. And Matthew, when he recounts these things, recalls the ancient prophecy which announced another name that was to be given to the virgin's child. We sang about it. You shall call his name Immanuel, which means God with us. Now, the juxtaposition of these two names helps us to understand. Remember, we said that Zaccheus wanted to see who Jesus was. Little could he understand. Little would he really know. It would take some time before the vastness of this dawned on him, that the one that he had encountered in that context in Jericho was none other than the incarnate God. That when Zaccheus had climbed up into the leafy sycamore tree in order to find out who Jesus was, when he looked down from that vantage point, he looked into the face of God incarnate, Immanuel, God with us. That answers the question, who is this? And the name Jesus answers a question which ought to follow along if we're thinking. If this is God in the flesh, God stepping down into time, the incarnate second person of the Trinity, revealing all that it is possible to know of God in human frame, if that is the case, then why did he come? Why did he come? Why would God step down out of the vastness of glory in his heaven? Needing no one. The answer is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish, but have everlasting life. In other words, the story of Christmas is a love story beyond our comprehension. Every so often at this time of year, we hear of a businessman who's been highly successful, and he has made a name for himself by going and serving for 15 minutes in a soup kitchen. And everyone makes a huge fuss about it. Very nice of him to do so. Certainly not going to say anything unkind about it. Or about a very successful and highly remunerated athlete who spends a little time on Christmas Eve in the children's hospital. And everyone says, can you believe that such a big, successful, wealthy athlete would go down to rainbows on a freezing cold evening like this? What an amazing thing for him to do. Well, I agree, it's jolly good. But you see what this is saying? The God who made you, who gave you your DNA, who woke you up this morning, who has sustained your life, that God, in the person of Jesus, stepped down into time to do for you and to do for me what we can't do for ourselves. We're dirty and we can't get clean. We've parked on the wrong street and we can't get off it. We're lost, and we need somebody to find us. See, Zaccheus was lost. He was rich, lost. Big job, lost. Nice house, lost. No friends, lost. So he decided he would go and see if he could find Jesus. And wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles, he discovered that Jesus had actually come looking for him. In fact, he called out his name. Zaccheus, come down. I'm going to come to your house. In Scotland, we used to say, and he said, Zaccheus, you come down because I'm coming to your house for tea. Yes, I'm coming to your house for tea. I suppose here it would be, I'm coming to your house for coffee or something else. But he was coming to the house anyway. Why? And he didn't say, Zaccheus, come down, clean up your act, and I'm going to come to your house. No, he says, come down, I'm coming to your house. You see, religion says, clean up your act and maybe God will accept you. Christianity says God accepts you because of who Jesus is, what he's done, and why he's come. Religion says, do this and you'll be accepted. Christianity says, in Jesus you're accepted, therefore do this. It's vastly different. If I had time, I could talk more, but I don't, and we have to sing, Silent Night and do the candles and everything. But let me just leave you with this thought, because it is Christmas and you'll have a little time tomorrow and you can think. I don't think it's possible to do justice to the Christmas story as we read our Bibles without coming face to face with our helplessness apart from God. With our helplessness apart from God. It's not very palatable. People don't like it, but this is what the Bible says. It says that we're completely stuck. We're broken and we can't fix ourselves. All our best stuff is even dirty. And if God was simply grading on the curve, we might have a chance, but he hasn't, and his standard is perfection, and therefore we're up the creek. Unless somebody else is able to step in our place. So when you read this story, you can't sidestep it with sentimentalism, because it says to us, you're absolutely helpless without God. That's a tough diagnosis. And then it also immediately says, but here's the amazing provision that God has made for your need. In the tenderness of his love, he's come down to us in Jesus. And in the same way that Zaccheus went out looking and hoping to check out who Jesus was, little realizing that Jesus had come seeking him. The same is true for us. Zaccheus climbed up a tree in order to see him. Jesus was nailed to a tree in order to save him. In the last day or so, I got lost. I was separated from my wife. Don't quote that, but it's only for about an hour or so. And the details are unimportant. I was separated from her, and I couldn't find her. My phone was dead, and I had no way of getting in touch with her. And I was thoroughly ticked off with the whole operation, to tell you the truth. I was in a particular store. I did 3 stories 3 times, and on the 3rd time, when I was about to take hold of the tannoy system for myself and start shouting, I heard her dulcet tones calling to me. Allie. I said, oh, thank you for calling for me. I was about to, well, I wasn't going to tell her what I was about to, but the fact of the matter was that my separation was answered by her call. And the work of God in the Bible is that he calls out to the Zaccheuses of the world. He calls out to those who will acknowledge their helplessness. He calls out to the humble. He calls out to the hungry to feed them with the bread of life. But he does not call out to the self-satisfied and to the proud and the smug. In fact, I can guarantee you, because the Bible says it, that unless you will humble yourself as a little child, you will in no way enter the kingdom of heaven. But if you will, then his arms of welcome are wide open. You will discover that when you pull at the end of the rope, he is there at the other end and has been pulling from all of eternity, because he came seeking to save those who were lost. If you will acknowledge your lostness, then you will enter into the joy of all that is represented in the songs that we've been singing. and in the stories that we've been recounting.